What's going on, y'all? Too short,
Too tall.
in the building, Sauce Twins. Y'all know how we do this thing.
Got a special surprise for y'all today.
Hey, Dr. Joe. Hey, we got something real special for y'all. This is a little different than what we've done in the past. But yeah, y'all know how y'all do.
Follow the drip.
What's happening?
What's going on?
Dr. Joe, what's going on, man? How you doing?
How you doing,
Hey,
Doc?
Good. How you doing?
Doing
Yeah,
good,
Good to
man.
have you on today, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, for sure, man. So if we could kind of dive right into this thing, what's your specialty? Like, what do you offer your clients? What do you do, man?
And how did you get into it?
Yeah. So my specialty is I evaluate the vision system and the neurocognitive or cognitive system and how that all functions so that when you're playing your sport, we know that how well you're seeing, how well you're processing information, and how that all translates to the output of your muscles, to everything that you're doing. And the principle is how do we speed up your eyes and your brain so that everything around you seems slower, essentially slowing down the game, right? That's the ultimate for any athlete is like, how can I make faster decisions with better accuracy, with better precision? And that, I think, is the game. And so that's what we specialize in, is the evaluation piece of it, but then also the training of any areas that are deficit or any areas that are strong but need to be strong for your specific sport. And that is such a huge component of how you play the game, because 85% of everything that you see during a game is through your visual system, and you have to determine how things are going to go based on the information that you're getting.
Right.
So would you say that when it comes to proprioception, 85% of it is vision? I mean, you don't play the game with your eyes closed and just using your,
Ears.
it's pretty much proprioception is dominated by vision in sport, obviously, right?
So yeah, so when you're saying proprioception, so proprioception is the combination of the visual system and the vestibular system, and how those two link together, right? That's an important piece, because like how you understand where your body is in space has to come from the vision, but it's also determined by the inner ear workings of everything. And so those two things combined give you an idea of the relationship that you have with the area around you, right? Imagine you're playing football and you go up for a catch and you stretch back and you're going to grab the ball. Well, now you have to understand, where am I going to come down? How's my body got to roll? Where am I in space? And that comes from vision, but also like the understanding of everything else around you.
Got you.
Okay. So do you, as far as I didn't even get to hear this part. How did you even get into your profession? Have you always done this, or?
So I graduated optometry school in 2009. Seems like forever ago now, but it also seems like just yesterday, right?
Yesterday, right.
And so growing up, I played all the sports you can imagine. My heavy influence was in soccer and in wrestling, and those were the sports that were my main area. But I played every other sport, and so through that process, you're like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, you have your teams, you have your groups, your camaraderie, all that stuff. But I think that when we were doing all of that stuff, like, I had never had an eye exam in my life, like all the way through that. And it's not because my mom and dad didn't know; they just didn't. Everything seemed fine for me, so it wasn't like anything that I needed to do or to get cleaned up. I go to undergrad, and played some club sport, but not really anything because I was more there for the academics. And I had a major in biology, minor in chemistry at Marquette University. Graduated, and I wanted to do something in the medical field, and I went into the optometry field. And so, in 2005, I went to the Illinois College of Optometry, and while I was in school, there was nobody doing anything for athletes. Like it was like such an afterthought that I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. There's a lot of people who play sports who probably have some visual problems, and they just don't know it because I had visual problems I didn't know about, right. And I was an athlete, and like if I had those things cleaned up, what could I have potentially been as an athlete? And then also, like, even if I had those vision problems and I still overcame them physically, like what could my potential have been had I gotten those cleaned up and then I still continued to train that system? And so through school, I would ask all my professors, I said, hey, like, why is nobody doing anything for athletes? And they're always like, oh, well, most of them can see pretty well, and it's not anything that is going to be a big revenue.
Not even thinking about the performance.
Right.
They weren't thinking at the after part of it, right? And I was like, well, still, like, even if it's just the evaluation piece, like, I still think we're missing a lot of people who could have been really physically gifted and had a vision problem, and what would that person have been? And now they're out of the league, or they were 6'8" and 350 pounds, and they were an offensive lineman, but they couldn't see in their visual, like they couldn't see a certain piece of the play, or their left side was deficit or something, so they couldn't be, protecting the quarterback as well as they should be. And so, like, all of those things were like running through my head as I'm watching sports. I'm watching these athletes do these, amazing things, and I'm like, gosh, I feel like there is just something here that we're missing. And when I graduated school, I went into corporate optometry, hated it, soul sucking. Like, it was just like this repetitive, boring, like 1 or 2, which is better. Like, that's the stereotypical eye exam. Mm-hmm. And it just was this nagging thing on me, and ever since 2009. And then in 2018, I was like, I'm just going to do it. Nobody else is doing it. I'm going to go do it. And so, I put together what I thought what an evaluation would look like. I put together what I thought would be cool from an athlete standpoint, and developed it from the standpoint of how do we develop an evaluation specifically for these athletes and what their visual systems are doing and what their brains are doing and how much they're needing to process and how fast they're needing to process that information, and how can we look at that. And then over the next 6 years was like, how do I develop the training for objectively showing them we can make them better? Like, I think there's always like 2 schools of thought, where one group of optometrists are just like, yeah, okay, well, we're going to do vision therapy, which is like correcting their visual system. But I'm more interested in how do we clean up, like, and improve how fast their brain actually can take this information in, and then directly translate that to their sport. Because I think that's I think that's the game is.
What?
Absolutely.
What does an assessment look like? Well, and how do I know that I need an assessment? Is there something that when you go look at a game, just like when we go look at the game, and we're in athletic performance, so like we're looking at people's mobility and their biomechanics. I'm looking at how people are walking. I'm looking at toes and feet and ankles and hips and back and neck. When you go look at the game and you watch athletes move, is there something that you're looking at? Because I know right off the top of the head, like I was a punt returner, and so in college, and I tell everyone this story. Like, there was one of our teammates, and talented guy, like you're saying, but it would seem like at times the ball would get on top of him at the last minute, and he would be surprised. And someone on our staff caught it, and they were like, "Hey, we need to take him to go get his eyes checked." And sure enough, he had some issues, some visual challenges, and man, they got it cleaned up.
Yeah.
He was catching everything. And I'm like, well, he's a great athlete, but if the ball is getting on top of him and now that's just something really obvious. Is there something that you're looking at when you're looking at these athletes? And then what what does an assessment look like when they come to the office?
Yeah, for sure. Those are great questions. So let's just take that example and expound upon it, right? So you're very familiar with punt returning, kick returning, that kind of stuff. While you're doing that, you have to do this, right? Like you have to like go up, check where the ball's at, check where everybody else in the field is at, then go back up and then adjust to where the ball is. But you're doing this like really quickly, like this up and back and then out and forward super quickly. Your eyes need to understand depth, and it needs to understand multiple objects moving at the same time. And wherever your focus is, so let's say your focus is the ball at that second, you're still picking up information down here, right?
I was about to ask that.
And that's called the multiple object tracking. And so you're trying to figure out who is where and what is my next movement based on when I catch this. Or, hey, everybody's on top of me. There's not enough time, so I gotta, call fair catch, right? Like,
Right.
That's the thing that you have to be processing, right? But if you can't see it, first of all, which is probably the case with your buddy, he probably just had a prescription that he couldn't see the ball clearly until it was like 10 feet away, and then he has to adjust quickly and then decide like what to do. Or there could be a depth perception problem, meaning his eyes aren't aligned. And so he doesn't actually understand in space where the ball is as it's coming closer to him. And so he could be misjudging the object in space, or he could be, his sympathetic system, nervous system could shoot up when he gets into that like stressed spot, and then he's now acting from a fight or flight response. Like all.
And real quick, how does that change? So if he's reacting to the nervous system in that manner, what does that do to his eyesight? Because if an athlete gets nervous shooting free throws or trying to catch a big time punt return and their heart rate increases, what does that change in that system, in the vision system?
It changes a whole bunch of different things. Primarily, like when the blood pressure goes up, you have to take that to the extremities, right? Because you're now going to have to like fight or flight, so that all that blood has to be used differently. So you're essentially kind of draining some of that from your brain, which is where your cognitive system needs to make decisions. And you're just in like live and survive mode. And so then the pupils will dilate because they need to get more information in, and then all of that information has to then be processed while you're in this like heightened state. So you get almost like tunnel vision, you get very like this, right? Like everything is just like the only thing that's on top of you is the only thing that you're worried about, and that doesn't allow you to like make the best decisions possible, right? So let's say he's stressed out because he can't see the ball, and then all of that other stuff gets on top of him. Now his confidence goes down. Like all of these things are like little metrics along the way that could have just like was very easily cleaned up with just go get an eye exam, right? But back to the original question, I think athletes should be doing this every year at a minimum. Like they should be doing a full sports vision performance evaluation at a minimum. Some of my higher level guys, we do it every 6 months because like I want them to be as highly tuned as an IndyCar is, right? Like we're talking every single nut and bolt to be in place, to be finely tuned, because all of that affects their performance. And that's the way we need to think about athletes as well, right? Like right now, everybody's worried about their physical abilities, their like that's your guys' specialty, right? Like their posture, the way that they hold their weight, the way that their core engages, the way that their hips are aligned, the way that their ankles pronate or supinate. Like all of these things are things that are super important. But again, so is their sleep, so is their recovery, so is their diet, so is their so is their mindset, so is like all of these things are now a piece of the puzzle for the athlete, right?
Yeah.
But vision and cognition are still not, and it blows my mind because most of the information that we're getting, again, comes from our eyes, especially when we're playing sports, and then 50% of our brain is dedicated to vision. So like, why are we not thinking that this is a huge important piece of what we're doing in sports when every other piece is being looked at? And it's like, to me, this is a glaring problem. You know,
Right. No,
And
That
I,
makes
it's a
sense.
I
simple
agree.
fix.
Yeah,
I agree.
that
Now,
makes sense.
now, when you say you feel like everyone should get an assessment done,
Mhm.
if someone comes into the office, what does an assessment look like? What does the first session look like, and the assessment look like when they come see you?
Yeah. So the assessment takes, for me, it takes about an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half. We go through a full case history. We break down what position you play, what sport you play, like what level you're at, because that kind of dictates where we then put you and rank you against other colleagues of yours or other, people in your similar stature. We then take a look at your visual acuity, how well you judge contrast, so lights and darks, different shades of gray. We take a look at how your accommodative or your focusing system works, so how you go from far away to up close, back to far away, like how how you how you track multiple objects at the same time. Like, what is your capacity to take in information? How much information can you take in? What is your raw reaction time? What is your choice reaction time? So when I say raw reaction
With
time,
all of these movements, do you do them stationary, or are you also moving? Is there an element to where these athletes are active while they're
yep,
testing
yeah.
these? Okay.
So there's a couple different breakdowns of things, right? Like, so the first portion of it, they're pretty stationary, but they're like working on a tablet, and we're trying to figure out what are all of their
Okay.
metrics. Then the next part, I take a look at what their like prescription is, what glasses prescription they need, what contacts they need, and just making sure that their acuity is clear. So what you would get at a general eye exam, right? Like a general eye
Okay.
exam. I still do that piece of it, and the overall health.
Okay.
But then we take a look at the binocular system, which is how your eyes are aligned, how they move, how they take in, how they like go back and forth, like all that stuff that's pretty standard if you go to like a vision therapist. And then we do like virtual reality, where we are actually in the VR headset working through additional testing and calibration and assessments. And then we do some eye-hand coordination stuff and some work on the sensory station. And so
Okay.
all of that together gives me a really, really clear picture of how the information comes in and then how it's processed and how it goes out.
Gotcha.
Sounds interesting. I heard VR. So what are you exactly doing on the VR?
Yeah. So the VR, in the evaluation, all we're doing is assessing like what their reaction time is, what their decision making time is, how they're tracking multiple objects. Like all of these things are assessed here. When we're in training sessions, we then use the VR. We have 6 or 7 different programs that will run depending on the session for the first like 10 or 15 minutes. So think of it as warming up your eyes and your brains, almost like, let's say you're putting people through like a warm up for training with you guys. You want them to do jumping jacks. You want them to do some burpees. You want their bodies to get like warmed up, because we know performance is going to improve if everything is sufficiently like stretched out and warmed up, and like that they're in a good place to then maximize their workout. VR, we use it as the same way. So we use it to go high rep, low load, meaning there's some applications in there. You guys have probably heard of Beat Saber, right? The one where you're like,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
yeah. So most people play that just for fun, but that's an app that if we build it out correctly, I know exactly where you are, like what your ability is based on how well you perform on these certain songs, because we've categorized them in easy, medium, like easy, normal, blah, blah, blah. And we know how well you're performing based on how well you're doing. And then we progress you based on your level of proficiency. So that's like the first like 10 or 15 minutes, depending on what we're doing. But we're doing it high volume, low load. So there's no hurt on the body. It's just like warming your eyes and your brain up to do the next activities, right?
Gotcha.
So I don't know if you've heard. You might have heard Jaden Daniels out of the Commanders.
Yeah.
He works with. He does virtual reality, he's done this since he's been in LSU, but he does virtual reality where they'll load the plays in for him, and they'll load the stadium, they'll load all of the stuff in. So he's doing the same thing that we've been doing for the last 6 years, is like high volume of stuff with zero on his body, right? Like he doesn't have to physically run through the plays, but he can then process what's happening in the plays in front of him and understand, okay, this is the coverage, here's the zone defense, here's what my guys should be doing, here's my first option, here's my second option. I know when this happens out here, I know what my next play is because I saw that happen, right? Like if the safety jumps or whatever, like he knows, okay, that eliminates option one. I now got to go to option two, and that's a check down to my running back because whatever happened. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But like he can see the play 50 times if he wants to before the game because he knows that that's in their lineup, and he now has an edge over everybody else who's only run that in practice 5 times. He's seen it 75 times, right? So like he's doing all of this additional mental cognitive loading so that he can pick those plays apart faster than anybody else. And then he knows, it's almost like predictive analytics. He knows where he's going next because he's already seen it.
Right.
I don't mean to go back from VR, but I was interested to know too, like, our past injuries have to be a big part of the assessment process, right? And like concussions.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
what after a concussion, or how about this? I know what I think. We always talk about when we go through our assessment, we can kind of get a feel for what athletes have had a concussion, looking at their walking gait and how wide their gait is or how they swing their arms. These are some of the things that I look at when I'm doing an assessment that makes me ask, like, hey, did you have a head injury? What are some of the things that happen internally, after a concussion that, you know about as far as your eyesight and how it affects your performance, and what kind of corrective measures do you make when it is something like a concussion?
Yeah, so that's a huge part of what we do as well. Like that's a great point. I would argue that our evaluation is among one of the best in the country for concussion evaluation because we are looking at every single point along the way, right? Where if you go to a neurologist after you've had a concussion, they might just ask you, some memory questions, and they might have you, just rest and wait a couple weeks and then work on recovery, right? But if you've come in and done an evaluation with us and you happen to have a head injury that same season or whenever, I can now objectively take a look at your reevaluation or your post-concussive evaluation from point A to point Z and say, here's where it's affecting. These are the points in your brain where, hey, your contrast sensitivity is off, so that tells me it's in your lateral geniculate nucleus, or your processing of information is slowed down, so we know that it's in your prefrontal cortex. You're having issues with your executive decision, or your eyes aren't going back and forth as quickly as they should. When we tested it originally, on this test you were X. Now today, after your concussion, you're at Y. That's a 20% reduction. We know we have to get you back up to at least this level. And those are objective findings, meaning it doesn't matter what the subject tells me. It doesn't matter what the player says they feel or how they feel or anything related to him. I know
this is what it is.
Objectively, this is what it is. You're not going to lie to me. You're not going to tell me that you're doing better on this than you are. Your opinion doesn't matter on my results. And so, that's why I think it's so important that vision is a piece of it, because all of those systems that we talked about before are affected in a concussion, right? Concussion is basically your brain moving around and then hitting your skull, because it's literally just floating in fluid, and then as it hits your skull, you're going to get bruises, right? Mm-hmm. And so, in most cases, again, this is just my opinion, I think that we need to be tracking all players in the NFL from a 100% versus just like when it happens, or running like the impact testing or something like that. Like those can be tricked. Like those can be. There's some internal flaws in some of that stuff.
Yeah. Now, when you do have an injury or a head injury, my question to you is: let's say you talked about the executive decision when it comes to their vision. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but let's say you saw a 20% decrease in their ability to perform this task. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend, like, hey, if you don't regain at least 15% of this, you shouldn't go back? Is there some type of recommendation, like, hey, you have to get back all of this 20% before you can return to play, or it's safe for you to come back at about 14%? Like, is there some kind of gauge on this?
Protocol.
Yeah. Or you take all of your data and use your field.
Yeah, I think it's important to take all of the data and to understand where they're functioning. I think I always take the safer, cautious approach, especially when it's been more than their first concussion, because when we compound a second concussion on top of that initial concussion, the results, the outcome is much worse. Meaning, like, if you have a concussion and you come back too soon and you have another concussion in 2 weeks and you haven't had a proper chance to recover from the first one, the compounding effect of that could potentially put you out 6 months, a year. Like, that's
so Tua.
That's what I'm thinking.
So what happened to Tua?
Exactly. Yeah. So I actually wrote an article on our website. You guys can check that out for Tua, where, like, I'm concerned about Tua because he wants to play. Like, that's 100% him. This is his life. He can obviously do whatever he wants. But I fear they don't necessarily know where he was functioning before his very, very first concussion.
Before it happened, yeah.
Where he was functioning after his second one, where he's functioning after his third one, and where is he going to be functioning after his fourth? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the problem that I see, is that we're not doing the initials really well. And then when we have a second, third, and fourth, I don't know where he was first. I don't know where he was. I don't know what problems he was having before to tell you he's good. And that's the problem.
That makes sense.
And that sucks.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
it does suck.
Because if I could have seen Tua, and I could have then he comes back, he does some work with us. We work on cleaning all these things up, and then I know he's 100% good to go back. I have much less concern about a secondary than I do from the first.
I hate to say this, but it almost, with some of these head injuries, especially in the league, I know they're trying to do, it's up for debate if they really care, add an extra game to the season, trying to, have all of these protocols and, penalties set in place against head injuries, but it almost feels intentional at this point that they don't really want to know where you start out at. So it can't be objective when it comes to saying he shouldn't go back. Because we all know Tua shouldn't have went back. But Tua passed the concussion protocols like they always do. We always see, they passed the concussion protocol. We see it. We played the game, as a player. We understand, you want to be out there on the field, you want to play. But it almost feels like the league doesn't want to have too much information on it when it comes to it. But okay.
So when something like that,
I'm not trying to get in trouble with the league, but I agree with you, because if this was a major concern for them, they would do more than put these silly hat things on their helmets. Which
I was going to ask about that.
Oh, you're about to ask how effective? They say they're not.
How effective are they?
The Guardian caps?
Yeah.
The movement is inside of your brain. Like, your brain is inside of your head, so it doesn't matter what's on the outside. You can put 50 pieces of stuff out here. If your brain still hits against your skull, like, you're going to get a bruise. Like, it.
Regardless.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it lessens the impact of it, but still, I mean, these hits are insane. Like,
yeah.
Like the offensive linemen are going up against 30-mile-an-hour car wrecks every single time they're going up. Like that's a hard life to have to go up through, and then to assume that you're not impacting and
Having
making
an impact on your performance. Not even just performance. I mean, we can just talk about quality of life.
Life.
Yeah,
Right.
We just talk about quality of life.
Yep. The CTE stuff.
Yeah.
These small concussive hits. Like every time these subconcussive hits happen, you're breaking these little axons that are what's sending information through your brain, and these are breaking apart. They're not going to regrow back together, and then that's really
What did you say they're called? Axons?
So there's a dendrite. So imagine there's a dendrite that receives information, and the axon passes the information to the next dendrite. Yep. So all that information has to like synapse through your brain in order to get all the information out, right? But what's happening is in these hits, these axons are breaking, so then the information doesn't flow. When they break, they also release a protein called tau, T-A-U. It's a tau protein, and this is what they're finding is building up in CTE players, causing the CTE. So the
changes in behavior and
exactly. Yeah, so they might affect different people different ways because the tau proteins are clumping, and then your body can't get rid of this like protein clumped together. So imagine these like masses of proteins building up in specific spots of your brain. That's going to affect your memory. It's going to affect like wherever it happens. That's going to affect all those parts of your brain, aggression and all of that other stuff. And so we don't have a real way to like check that stuff. Like we can't.
Until they pass away.
Pass, right? Because we can't. I'm sure they're working on it, but we don't know for sure without like having a brain that has had these impacts to evaluate the depth of the impact that it's going to have on them.
The trauma, yeah.
Right, but if we evaluate their vision and their cognitive systems early, we will be able to detect a trend if stuff is happening. You know, like I think eventually in 10 years that's going to be an important piece of all of this stuff. Like how are we looking at it initially versus like at the end of it? How are we addressing it from the front side versus the back side?
Yeah. So we got these like skull caps and stuff and things like that, but is there really a way that you can prevent from getting a concussion?
Man.
Like, are there things that you can do to
I think,
stop that from happening?
So a lot of research has been done about like when to start tackle football. Like it should be flag up until 14. Like,
oh, really? I saw 12. Well, I'm sure there's different stuff, but okay, so 14.
Yeah. So I would say to go later and later because I would focus on like the tackling technique way more than anything else. Especially because like young kids, their brains are so susceptible to, more stuff happening because of improper technique. Like once you get to the NFL, like guys know how to tackle, they know what they're doing. Whereas like for kids, they're just out there just launching their bodies.
They're still trying to figure it out.
You know, now I don't know where I read this or how, just through the years, strengthening the neck had been one of the biggest things. Now, is this something that's outdated? Like strengthening your neck so that you have the ability to control, so, that impact or not being so whiplashy. Yeah. Is that true? I know this may not be your, but is this?
So I'm not sure with neck. I'm not sure what the correlation between neck strength and concussion.
I think what they're trying to say is like the stronger your neck is your ability to absorb the impact. So when you go hit or you get hit and you get slung to the ground, if you have a stronger neck, it won't be as an explosive whiplash of a movement that won't cause the brain to then, hit the inside of your skull as much.
Yeah, I understand the premise of it. I just don't know
Yeah.
if there's any like correlating data to say one way or the other. Now I know
Okay.
a lot of IndyCar drivers that we work with, they train the strength of their neck because they're at such high G's that like, if they're going into a turn, like they have to like have really strong neck muscles, and it's not necessarily for concussion. It's more for like for being able to bear the load of like those high corners and like the amount of pressure that's put on their system.
Yeah.
And
we got a driver. Daniel. Yeah, Daniel. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. We have a race car driver here at the facility.
Yeah, we'll have to.
Yeah, he talks a lot about strengthening his neck.
Yeah. We need to make that connection.
There's a good product called the Iron Neck.
Yeah, we have one of those. The Iron X has the bungee, a little dome, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. If you guys need somebody who like is really good with that piece of equipment, there's a guy here.
Okay.
His name is Jim Leo. He trains out of PitFit, and they work with a lot of the IndyCar drivers on that specifically. So if you don't like, I can connect you with whoever you need.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to.
I think it's good to have that strength in that core for football players, but these guys are already really strong, and so like, and it still happens. So I think there has to be some other way that we can look at this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nah, cool, man.
So I know, like in our profession, like there's a lot of similarities than there are differences between the sports. So, like with your profession, do you see that certain athletes, like football athletes, have worse vision, or is there like a certain group that needs more work than another group, or?
So I will say that there is a difference between who accepts the idea more of like the importance of vision, or at least understands it more, versus who's actually better than somebody else. Okay. Meaning, I think that there's like an 80 to 85% crossover between all sports. Meaning, like, I'm never going to be your basketball coach. I don't want to be. I'm never going to be your football coach or your wide receiver coach. Like, that's not my area of expertise. What I do see is that all of these similarities between vision and cognition, they overlap between sports. And so whoever's really good at most of these things is typically really good at their sport. With a few exceptions, they're like I was saying, IndyCar drivers, their processing speed, so like how fast they get information through, is really quick. Like that's a real, like it's leaps and bounds above even NFL quarterbacks.
They always.
Stuff, right? So they're going, but they're in a potentially life and death situation, whereas football is like the likelihood of that happening is extremely small. And so like, they have to be programmed to like be really good at all of those skills. But generally, like there's an overlap, and I would say I could pick out, like let's say we evaluated an entire football team. I could probably tell you who is probably your all-stars, who is probably your like guys who are okay, but like you're not expecting much from them this year, and then who is like bottom of the barrel or like really struggling with stuff without knowing anything else about them than what their vision and what their cognitive systems are doing. Like, it really does allow me to like filter people out.
Yeah.
Sounds like this would be an important piece just on an evaluation or recruiting.
Absolutely.
I might have to give you another sell point to add to your business over there. Because I mean, if they come and they do this assessment with you, and especially we're talking about quarterbacks. Let's just talk about quarterback. Well, they always talk about the ability to process information. How fast can you process the information, retain, and regurgitate this information? Then this seems like it's a no-brainer to have this done, especially when it comes to recruiting or signing a player or a free agent in the free agent market. Like, this cat had issues, but I can tighten him up. His processing is better now. He's a great player, but You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
or his processing
absolutely.
isn't that great. We should stay away from this. I mean, I'm just saying,
You
like,
just got more data.
it
more
seems
info.
like I like that.
Yeah.
I like
So-
that, man.
Let's talk Jameson Winston or Jameis Winston.
My guy.
Yeah.
He's like had an awesome game last night. I loved his energy, everything about it, right? But before he the first two seasons, he didn't know that he couldn't see well. He had never had an eye exam. He was an NFL quarterback. Got drafted number one. Was he number one?
I think it was first overall. No,
Was he?
after the
He was
national
seeing-
championship.
He was seeing horribly. That's why his interceptions outpaced his touchdowns. He couldn't see.
Hey, I'm sorry. I don't know how they didn't know, because he was looking to the sideline like this, like in the games. We were laughing about it before he actually got the evaluation done. That's crazy. But you're right.
I've gone to the combine here a few times, and I was speaking with a high-level guy at the LA Rams, and I asked him, I'm like, so what are you guys doing for, what do you do for vision? What is, like when you're potentially drafting somebody, who are you sending them to? What does all that look like? Because I was just interested. And he's like, oh, we don't do that. We just, and this quote will always blow me away. He's like, we just figured those guys would have weeded themselves out by now.
That's what they don't.
They don't realize how much athletes overcome. Athletes overcome so much. They operate at levels that you wouldn't imagine.
Yes.
That's what we do. That's why we're high-level athletes. We overcome a lot of things and still perform well, but it can be even better.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and
That's crazy.
Let's just say we cleaned up the easy stuff, and then we worked on the other stuff too, right? I have not seen a maximum yet for how fast we can get somebody's brain to go.
Okay.
I haven't seen a limit yet. As long as you're willing to show up and be consistent, we can get you results to make your brain go
Continue.
faster. So everything around you seems slower. It's just all of these little points. How do we make each part 1% better, 2% better? That gives you exponential growth versus just 1 or 2% better.
Obviously, if anyone has any kind of issues or anything, they need to come and see Doc. But is there anything that, people can do at home?
Or in between sessions, or is there any kind of homework or that you give your athletes or any of your clients?
Yeah, so we've thought through all of that as well. I always wanted to view everything that we do through the athlete's perspective and understand that they don't have time to do all of this other stuff, to go to an office, to go in. Your guys' time is very, very valuable. When you have off days, those are valuable off days because you need those for rest, recuperation. You can't. I don't want you traveling to a bunch of different places and doing a whole bunch of different stuff. And so we built out what we call Aries Academy, which is our at-home training platform, and we have multiple different ways you can do training, and you can do. There's a novice program that is just the very, very basic stuff. You guys could download the novice stuff and start using it for any athletes that you guys have there, just to have vision skills be a thing that you incorporate, or that you hey, this might be good for you. It's super easy, basic stuff. Just need to download the charts and print them off. You don't need any equipment. It's really basic level entry stuff. Then our advanced program is a little bit more upscaled. It's 3 months of programming built out, and then we drop ship you a bunch of equipment, and it tells you exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it. It walks you all the way through all of the stuff, holding your hand, so that it's super easy. And then we have our higher level programs, which would be our elite or our elite custom, where we're drop shipping you a virtual reality headset. We're putting all the applications on. We're running telesessions with you as well. So let's say you have an hour where you can do training in the hotel, and you brought your MetaQuest and all of your other stuff that you would have needed. Cool. Let's run your telesession while you're at your facility or wherever you can. and we'll make ourselves available to train you through that stuff and push you. And so it's how do we accomplish the things that we want to at the highest level possible, where you're at, what your abilities
Right.
are, and how do we accommodate that stuff. And I think that's, hopefully I've made an educated guess that that's an important piece for athletes, instead of having to like take the entire off season off, not focus on this stuff, and then try to make up as much as they can in the off season, right? Like, I want people to be working on all of this stuff as much as possible, because it is so valuable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that, man.
Absolutely.
I love that. Dr. Joe, man, I appreciate you, man. This has been great. I've learned a lot today. And
Absolutely, man.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me on, letting me chat with you guys. And
for sure. Hey, where can people follow you, and like, what's the name, of the, like, how can people get in contact with you? Twitter, Instagram, emails, whatever you want to share, like.
Yeah, so we the website is, so the company's name is Ares Elite Sports Vision, ARES, and the website is just areselitesportsvision.com, and our Instagram is at Ares Elite Sports Vision 1. And honestly, those are probably the 3 best places to go. On our website,
Okay.
we have a bunch of blog articles, we have a bunch of information. We have, like, I wanted to make it a hub for people to go to. Just get educated. Like, if that's a place that you're interested in learning more about this, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff there for you. But also, if you want to go to our Instagram, we have a whole bunch of, like, what the evaluation looks like, what the training looks like, what different drills and things you can do that are free. And we just want to be a value source for people who are interested in this stuff and want to dip their toes in.
I'm gonna let you know now. You'll be seeing me a lot, especially on that Beat Saber. I'm not pretty good at that.
Yeah, nah. Hey, man, y'all go and give them a follow. Tune in to all our athletes. Like, this is something we will be talking to our athletes about.
Absolutely.
I'd love to see what the program looks like. So you might, be seeing our names come across the site or in the email, just to see, like, if there are things that we can. Obviously, there are more things that we can learn, but things that we can pass along to our athletes, and then, man, even our high level athletes, like, they need to get up there.
Everybody.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out, man. Hey, I appreciate you again, man.
Yes,
Too
sir.
short.
All right, don't forget, this episode was powered by
www.sauceap.com/free3.
Go and get it.
Dr. Joe, man, appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Doc.
What will you sacrifice to be great?